in Dade County.
I love it.
Out of all.
All right, good evening, everyone. If everyone would take their places, we're going to go ahead and get started.
And the only one in South Florida more is Miramar.
Oops. It's a renewable resource. Okay.
It's good to see all you guys again.
All right, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year, and welcome to the City of North Miami Beach's first council conference workshop of the new year. And Madam Clerk, you want to take the roll for the record, please?
Councilman De Filippo.
Present.
Vice Mayor Kramer.
Present.
Councilwoman Martell.
Present.
Councilman Pierre. Councilwoman Smith.
Present.
Councilwoman Spiegel.
I'm here.
Mayor Vallejo.
I'm here. Thank you very much. Okay, we have one item to discuss tonight, which is, Madam Manager, you're bringing a presentation about, update, I guess, about the citywide zoning overlay. But before you get started, I just want to take a second to recognize I've got a distinguished guest in the audience today. We've got former Mayor Jeffrey Perillo from the City of Aventura. Thank you for coming out. All right.
Thank you. Good evening,
Floor is
Mayor.
yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, residents of the City of North Miami Beach, and special guests. We embarked on a strategic planning session several months ago, and we had a list of priorities. And one of the priorities that unanimously came forward from our Mayor and Council was taking a look at our comp plan and taking a look at our zoning. We've had several meetings throughout the community, several workshops throughout the community, and tonight we wanted to take that next step in bringing back some of the key information for everyone to continue to be engaged and informed in this very exciting process. I wanted to turn it over really quick to our Assistant City Manager, Richard Lorber, who's part of our team, the professional planner, that we were able to acquire him from the great city of Miami Beach, working with Carlos Rivero, who's not only a resident, but he's also a planner. We've been able to partner with RMA and Associates. So we've really put together a good team to really evaluate our entire city to see where we go in regards to maximizing our opportunities and our full potential. Yeah, well, that was pretty good.
That was a good song.
Actually. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over real quick to our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Richard Lorber.
Thank you, Madam Manager, Mayor, council members, public. It's a great day today. We will present to you the comprehensive plan amendments. This is a workshop, the last workshop of the series. We've had 3 previous workshops. This is the 4th. Now we will be moving forward into this process, tonight's workshop, and then we have first reading scheduled for 2 weeks from today at your next council meeting. We will then be coming back to you with another workshop specifically on the zoning. This piece here is the comprehensive plan. The zoning is the next portion, and then we'll be having a first reading for that, and then this all gets sent to the state Department of Community Affairs, or it's another Department of Economic Opportunity is changed to. So, and then we anticipate the final adoption of this process in March. So we started this process basically a year ago, and you initiated this process, and you did a great thing by hiring this firm, RMA and Associates. I will say, in working with them over these last several months, the quality of work has been exemplary. I think they're tops in their field, and they're going to make a presentation to you this evening. I would just say, from my past experience, this is top quality work. We'll probably win awards for adopting this kind of a comprehensive planning and zoning initiative. As you know, it's selected 7 or 8 special areas, not the whole city, just certain target areas where new development is most appropriate and targeted. There will be an increase in development rights associated with this. Along with that comes an increase in responsibilities and the requirements from developers to add value to the city. So the consultant will go through this, show you what benefits we expect to gain from this, how this will work, what mechanisms are in place to ensure public benefit, that no developments are built that have negative impacts on surrounding neighborhoods. Again, there was some discussion previous that got into the details of some of the process. Right now, tonight, we're presenting comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is the 50,000-foot aerial view. That's the big picture. And as we go through the process, we'll bring you the zoning, which then splits it into more separate areas and more detail. And finally, each project that is proposed to be built will come before this body for site plan review. And at that point, we would actually be reviewing specific projects, specific plans, and finalize all the details. But this first step is the comp plan. It basically encourages new quality development, a mix of uses, commercial, office, and residential, where previously it was just one or the other. The mixed-use concept has many benefits. It creates lively, vibrant areas. There's a shared use of parking, and it can even improve traffic flow. So we expect this to be a success. We ask for your support, and without further ado, let's hear from the consultants to make a brief presentation.
All right, if you would, just before you get started, let me just ask, if I would ask my colleagues, let's jot down our questions or whatever, and let's let go through the entire presentation or PowerPoint or whatever it is, and so that we can make sure that we get through it, and then we'll if we have any, depending on how we do on time, we'll do questions and what have you. Thank you. Yeah. What?
At some point, because what the mayor just said, if we have time, we'll get to questions. At some point, I think the 7 of us or the 6 of us here tonight need to discuss it amongst ourselves.
We're going to have some time tonight, hopefully, and then we're going to have first reading, which will give us time to go through it. So
Okay. I would have hoped that we'd discuss it before first reading, and doesn't it go to planning and zoning before it comes to us?
Yes.
on Monday.
It's scheduled to go to the Planning and Zoning Board next Monday, and then subsequent to that, come back for first reading. But again, the purpose of the workshop is to explore with you any further questions, concerns. We're open to your questions, either here in this forum or any way you'd like.
Let's get through the presentation so we can get to that part. Okay, thanks.
No.
I don't know how to turn this on. Oh, it is on.
There you go.
Okay, good evening. I'm Jean Dolan. I'm with Redevelopment Management Associates, RMA. Natasha and I have been working on this project for you, where I am focusing on the comprehensive plan and Natasha focuses on the zoning. She's also here tonight, so if we have questions that cross over, we can certainly answer both, but we're really trying to focus in on the comprehensive plan tonight. Just a little overview of what we're going to cover in this presentation. First, we're going to talk a little bit about comprehensive planning versus zoning. That's always kind of a confusion, like what's the difference? An overview of the process that we've been through so far, which is very important because what we've done is wrap in responses to what we have heard through the public input process, and that's how we've organized the presentation. We'll also go through the comprehensive plan concurrency analysis just briefly, which is the majority of the application that you got is the concurrency evaluation. And then we'll talk about the next steps to get the comprehensive plan through the process and talk about the project timeline, how it meshes with the zoning. Now, comprehensive planning versus zoning. The comprehensive plan is dictated by Chapter 163 and is subject to state review. That's very different from the zoning. It establishes the vision, the purpose, and the philosophy of these districts, and these are principles that will always be true. That the comp plan is very inflexible, so you don't want to put anything in it that you might want to modify based on specific conditions. These are aspects that are always going to hold true. It establishes maximum entitlements that are based on gross acreages that go to the center line of the street, which is different than zoning. And it also when you do concurrency impacts for comprehensive plan amendments, it's based on the differences between what your current comp plan allows and what your proposed district allows. So it's strictly an analysis on paper. It's not an analysis of present conditions on the street. So that's very different from zoning. Now, zoning is more specific. It creates sub-areas within your mixed-use districts or specific zoning districts within your general land use categories, like with commercial, you'll have B1, B2, B3. In our mixed-use districts, we'll have core, center, and edge, where these zoning regulations will require special regulations, and much more specific regulations than the comp plan. It establishes net entitlements, which are measured inside the property lines, not to the center line of the street, so it reduces the max entitlements. And it further restricts developments by requiring open space, setbacks, and various aspects like that.
Ms. Dolan, let me just interrupt you 1 second. For anyone that's in the audience today, the presentation, there are copies of it on that table outside those doors, just in case anybody wants to grab one, okay? Oh, never mind. They're right here, even closer. It'll spare your eyes from seeing it on here.
And then finally, the concurrency impact analysis is very different with zoning. When someone comes in with a project, they're comparing the existing conditions plus their project. So that's what most people are used to. With the comprehensive plan, it's much more of a hypothetical analysis, so we don't make sure people understand the difference, and you'll see why when we get to the concurrency analysis portion of this presentation. Now, the public input process we've gone through so far has been pretty extensive. We started back in March. We did our first kickoff meeting then, and then March through June we've been doing stakeholder interviews, doing our urban design and land use analysis so that we can crunch all the numbers, figure out what you can do now, what we want you to be able to do. We met with council in July to do specific one-on-ones to find out what their issues are. Then in September we had our first outreach meeting, and that was on the FCC Mixed Use Town Center, the downtown area. September 22nd, we workshopped the Intracoastal Mall, which is the Eastern Shores area. And then October 6th, we talked about the Highland Village, Arch Creek area at the Highland Village Community Center. October 21st, we did our City Council planning workshop on the entire package of districts. And how we've organized this presentation is we took the issues that we heard while we were at those workshops and while we were at the final workshop with you all, and those that were appropriate for incorporation at the comp plan level we've included, and we figured this was a nice organizational structure rather than to do some boring read of every one of the policies that we're creating. We'll really target in on why they're there and what they're going to do. The mixed-use districts that we're going to talk about in this order are the same ones we've been discussing all these months at all these meetings. The town center mixed-use is the study area 1. We'll talk about that first. Then the 2 employment centers, which are 163rd Street South and 159th Street South. The 3 waterfront districts, which we're calling North Central and Eastern. And then the mixed-use corridor and the neighborhood center on the north. So first is our FCC Mixed-Use Town Center district. We created a new policy, which is 1.6.6, and this establishes the philosophy behind this mixed-use district. The highlights of that are it's encouraging transit-oriented development to result in an urban downtown setting, and it prohibits standalone auto-oriented uses, which are like surface parking lots, gas stations, auto repair, these kinds of auto-oriented uses. So these are the philosophies that are never going to change and always hold true within this district. The issues that were raised during the outreach process in this district relate to treatment of the Snake Creek Canal, issues related to the alleys and utilities, public art, and the incentives for redevelopment within the CRA. Those issues have all been addressed by policy 1.8.7. You're going to see policy 1.8.7 come up in every one of the districts because in this policy we require a pre-application meeting for anybody who's interested in developing in one of these land use categories. They come in, talk to staff, and they go through the specific issues that need to be addressed. The beauty of this policy is it codifies in your comp plan what the issues were when you were discussing this, so 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, these issues won't be forgotten as time passes by, that these were important. So we've added this policy in and included all these specific issues in that policy. Alleys and utilities are addressed in policy 1.8.8 under the design principles. There's a connectivity section in that plan, and what that does is set out when alleys will be considered for abandonment and when they won't. So that's been specifically written into the objectives. Snake Creek Canal is addressed through policy 1.8.6, which is your mixed-use design regulatory framework. There is a framework that's used in every district. All of them require this open space and greenway systems plan. And within this plan, which you'll see in detail when we go through the zoning on the 27th, we'll have the Snake Creek Canal requirements included. Public art is addressed in policy 1.8.1, and every mixed-use district will have to create and enhance community facilities, including public art and many other aspects, so that every project that come in will have to be thinking about how they're going to provide these facilities. Incentives for redevelopment was already addressed in your comprehensive plan through policy 1.6.3, and we've just modified that slightly to include a few more incentives. Shared parking wasn't mentioned. We mentioned the air rights over the alleys, which was one of the issues, and also looking at public-private partnerships, which wasn't previously included, but is an opportunity to create things like extra public parking and structured parking and so forth. So we added those additional incentives. Now, the mixed-use employment centers come next. There's two of those, the area south of 163rd and the area south of 159th, and they really connect on the map, but we're creating a separate basket of rights for each one. The highlight of the policy 1.67, which sets up the philosophy for the mixed-use employment center, is that we're using it to encourage economic development. We allow some auto-oriented uses as long as they're designed in a manner that's pedestrian friendly, and we allow both vertically and horizontal mixed use. The issues raised in the mixed-use employment center relate to compatibility with adjacent residential. If you have a lower density residential development, and this is particular to the 159th Street area where there's single family residential to the west, and also the potential historic designation of the TICO building. It was one of the things that came up when we talked about this employment center. So those issues were addressed in policy 1.8.7, which is our pre-application meeting requirement. So anybody who comes in to the 159th Street South Mixed-Use Employment Center will be required to discuss how they're going to handle this transition area and buffer to the west, and also the TICO building if it does get designated as historic. The transitional area minimum requirements are addressed in policy 1.8.8 within the design principles under land use compatibility. When there is a residential development that's a lower density adjacent to a mixed-use development, there will be at least a 50-foot buffer with no development in it, and then a 200 to 300-foot area where the building heights are transitioned to create compatibility with that single-family area. And those will be more further defined in the regulating plan and the zoning, but we've actually put this in the comprehensive plan so that it's very clear that this is a significant area within which those building transitions will be considered. Now, in the mixed-use waterfront districts, we have three of those. Policy 1.6.9 sets out the philosophy for those districts. The highlights there include the ability to maximize the economic resource of the waterfront by allowing residential development within that area. And also it requires public access to be provided to the waterfront to provide a benefit to everyone as we beautify that waterfront. The issues raised in the mixed-use waterfront districts include public access to the waterfront, screening of the FPL station in the South Waterfront District, additional access points to the East Waterfront District, retaining and enhancing the Miami-Dade Rescue Station for Eastern Shores, and adding a police substation for Eastern Shores. How we've addressed those issues, again, policy 1.8.7 is our pre-application meeting policy. We do require any applicant within those districts to specifically address those issues that have come up through the outreach process, whether they're in the north, south, or east mixed-use waterfront area. So that's specifically written into the policies. Policy 1.8.8 is our design principles and procedures. And again, this looks at the public realm as one of the aspects of the regulating plan. and requires integration of the public realm and particularly access to the waterfront. Now, the mixed-use corridor policy that establishes the philosophy for that district is policy 1.6.10. It's a new policy.
Can you go back one?
Yep.
Did you cover, oh, that's a different slide. Oh. Okay, never mind.
Get too far
just
ahead.
Go one more back. The bottom one there, that's the Eastern Shores?
Yes.
Did you read that?
Want me to read it?
Yeah, okay. That's really key in terms of the big picture for that area. And the traffic mitigation has to be addressed.
Okay. All right, so now we're on the mixed-use corridor, and the policy that we're adding with the philosophy in there, that corridor is to become a transit and business corridor to attract economic development and support the local and regional activities. We do allow limited auto-oriented uses in that district as long as they're designed in a pedestrian-friendly manner, and also here we'll have vertical or horizontal mixed use being allowed. Issues raised in the mixed-use corridor relate to the adjacent Biscayne Landing. Everyone wanted to make sure that anybody coming in there, developer, was aware of the environmental cleanup and related off-site impacts in that area, the floodplain encroachment and possible increased flooding, and the connectivity and crime prevention that needs to be considered with being adjacent to that project in North Miami. So to address that issue, again, we added it into the policy 1.8.7 so that at any pre-application meeting within that Arch Creek mixed-use corridor, they would have to be aware of and address those issues that were raised during that outreach process. Now, the mixed-use neighborhood center is the center on the north, just south of the new hotel. We added policy 1.6.8 to address the philosophy of that district, and that is to encourage a balanced mix of uses characterized by compact, pedestrian-friendly design at a neighborhood scale where the quarter-mile walking distance is significant. And actually, there was no specific issues that were raised during the outreach process on this district that would be addressed in the comprehensive plan or our zoning code amendments. So that district didn't have a lot of controversy related to it. Now, the comprehensive plan concurrency analysis is what we're going to talk about next. That was the meat of the application that you received to review, and that's really the meat of what the Department of Economic Opportunity looks at to make sure you're meeting all your level of service standards in your comprehensive plan amendment. When you do a comprehensive plan amendment, the impact analysis is very different than when you do an analysis for a specific project. When we're looking at the comprehensive plan, we're only looking at the theoretical comparison of what your current plan allows maxed out compared to what you're proposing maxed out. It does not look at existing conditions. So sometimes we get this groan in the audience when we say we're actually reducing the density intensity. Well, no, there's no residential units there now. Well, if your comp plan allows these densities and intensities and we're reducing that, then we are saying we're reducing the max build out based on the comprehensive plan entitlements. We're not saying that based on existing conditions it's going to be less. So we want to make sure that's really clear as we go through this portion of the presentation. Now there's the five new land use categories are all described in policy 1.8.2. This could perhaps be the most important policy in the whole comprehensive plan amendment because it establishes the basket of rights for each one of these districts, which is the total units and square footage that are allowed in the districts. Now, I'm not going to read all what's each one of these line items says because in order for this to be really meaningful, you need to compare it with what is already allowed by your comprehensive plan. So in the application on page 6 and 7, you'll find these tables where we pull out the existing plan and what's allowed by it, and we compare it to what we're proposing. And what you can see is that what we're actually doing is increasing residential units basically in the employment centers and in the waterfronts so that there's a 31% increase of residential in all these districts combined. And we're actually reducing the non-residential entitlements by 86%. Now, this is significant because when we do an impact analysis of the change on paper, Everything that is impacted by non-residential is going to look like a much smaller impact because we're reducing the entitlements to such a degree. The reason the entitlements are being reduced is the way your comprehensive plan is written. In fact, most comprehensive plans are written, is you have one height, which establishes the intensity of your non-residential. And when you do the math, you have to assume max build-out. So you take the entire property, you'd use the lot coverage in the zoning, and you assume everything's built to the absolute max. So that's why these numbers look so big when you actually do the math. But what we did was go through a whole planning process, do a master plan, which Natasha's been showing to you, come up with a reasonable amount of units and square footage, and use those as the entitlements rather than a maxed out box. So the concurrency analysis is it's significant in that the only two aspects of your level of service standards that are affected are recreation and open space and public education. And that's because that's the only two that are strictly affected by residential. Non-residential has nothing to do with those two categories. All the rest are impacted by both residential and non-residential, so the net loss of non-residential mitigates the 31% increase in residential completely. In the recreation and open space, you can meet your level of service standard, which is 2 acres per thousand. You already have 165.7 acres of residential in your city. You have 43,000 people now, and you'll have 52,000 people at total build-out of this plan amendment. The park acreage you need to meet your 2 acres per thousand at build-out of this amended plan is 104 acres. So you already have more than your level of service standard, so that is not a concurrency issue. Even though you don't need to do additional parks and recreation to meet your current 2 acres per thousand level of service standard, we have addressed that in the comprehensive plan in terms of creating more open space with this amendment. It's not a concurrency requirement, but it is something that we're putting in the plan because we want to see geographically located parks and recreation associated with these more intense districts. New policy 1.8.6 requires every district to have a designated open space and greenways regulating plan, and we'll go over those plans in detail on the 27th of January when we talk about the zoning so that you can see what they look like, but you see a diagram of one there. It requires open space, connectivity, and additional park space. The total additional park spaces that we're showing on our regulating plans today is another 14.14 acres of open space. So even though your current level of service doesn't require it, you will be getting more parks and rec space with these regulating plan requirements. Now, the public education was the other aspect that is affected when we add residential units. Right now, Miami-Dade shows that there's adequate capacity within their concurrency service areas that are affected. They have thousands of available seats projected, and we only need a few hundred. So there didn't show any inadequacy in the quantity of public education seats available. This is not a quality analysis. This is a quantity analysis, and that's all the Department of Economic Opportunity looks to. So you don't have any level of service issues in that aspect either. Now, the next steps in the comprehensive plan amendment process, we do go to the Planning and Zoning Board next. Then we'll have City Council first reading. Then we send this to the state for review, which they take 30 days, give or take a week. Then we have time to address any comments we get from the state review, and then we'll come back to you for a second reading and adoption. So this is quite a lengthy process, and you can make changes at any time during this process right up to adoption. The project timeline we're showing here today, we're having our council workshop on these policies. January 12th is when we go to the Planning and Zoning Board on Monday. Then the 20th will come to you for first reading. Once you've done first reading, we transmit to the state, and it's going to be up there for a month. So we'll be doing a lot of the zoning stuff during that month. March 17th is when we have our tentative scheduled second reading. Now, in the meantime, January 27th, we'll be talking to you at another workshop about the zoning. And then February 9th will be the Planning and Zoning Board meeting on the zoning. March 3rd will be your first reading to adopt the zoning. And then March 17th will combine the land use and the zoning at one hearing. We'll adopt the land use first and then follow it up with the zoning. if all goes as planned. So with that, I thank you. I hope we didn't rush that too much, but we really wanted to get through that so you could get right to your own questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dolan. What I'd like to do is let's see if we can, anybody who's got questions, let's go ahead and we'll jump around. I would ask anybody, if we have questions, make sure, let's ask them, and let me make sure I can jump around to give everybody on the council an opportunity with questions. But I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank you for the presentation, Madam Manager, Assistant Manager, Mr. Rivero, everybody that's been involved in this project. Thank you for the long hours and the effort that's gone into this. This thing has been a long time coming, and actually, when you really look back, that stuff like this has been tried in the past in different ways and has never been able to get passed. I think I'm very happy that we've gotten this far. This has been a very long, as evidenced by that slide with the dates, process, very transparent, very open, very collaborative, a lot of public input. But most importantly, what I see here is that this is something that was identified by every one of us up here that has spoken at one point or another, and that this was adopted as a top priority in our strategic plan on a 7-0 vote. The only thing I'm concerned about is I want to make sure that we don't get bogged down in minutia on stuff that maybe is more appropriate at the different zoning level hearings. Long ago I learned that if you're looking for perfection on this plan, you ain't going to find it. And I don't think there's ever a plan that will be perfect. I mean, we can always find something to nitpick about, but I think overall this is a tremendous, tremendous forward step for the city, and we're looking for progress, not perfection 20 years from now, but progress, forward progress today. So I'm happy, and let's see what kind of questions. I'm sure we've got a bunch. Let's hear. Go ahead and start.
Actually, I wanted to talk to my colleagues to see what their opinion was, because in the section that we spoke on having to do with Highland Village, I know that I've been approached in regards to maybe doing some changes to Highland Village, being as in having the ability to build those homes that look like the Key West homes, where at the bottom you have where you park the car, and then you have your actual home starts afterwards. I did speak to our manager and to Mr. Lobert about that, and I wanted to find out if that would be something that our council would also like to place in here, because right now it's not in here.
Wait.
So it's something that would
Wait, hold on a second. Before we assume that, let's ask the question, is this allowed, or is this covered, or is this, do you know what we're talking about?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We've had these conversations, yeah.
Absolutely. That is something that we said we would address through a zoning, at the zoning level. And since we're not including that particular residential area in the comp plan amendment, we're going to address it through the specific zoning district and change it there. So what you're seeing here is really just the Arch Creek area, but we are going to tweak the language in the existing zoning, because it's not a comp plan issue, it's a specific development standard about height.
Okay.
Okay.
What's that?
yeah, I wanted that answered. And my other question is on the 1.8, all the changes that are being addressed in the 1.88. Hold on, I wrote page.
Which 1.8?
I'll tell you right now. Give me just
1.82,
one second.
1.88?
Page 11.
On the
In
text
that-
side.
On the landscape one?
Sorry. Go ahead.
You have the area where it says alleys and utilities. How does this, how is this portion of it going to be addressed by our city?
In other words, when we vacate an alley versus... Are you talking about what this does in regards to putting us in a predicament that we can make decisions on existing alleys?
Yes.
Would you like to answer that, please?
What this does is just let the developers know that if they need the extra depth because they need the alley space to make their parking structure work, we'll consider letting them build over that alley if it doesn't ruin the connectivity. If someone else is depending on that alley for access, then obviously we won't allow it. But we will consider it if that alley isn't needed for something else.
Okay, thank you.
And again, at the comp plan stage, we're stating the general policy that, we want to be able to deal with this. The zoning will have more specific mechanisms detailed.
All right, let me jump over here.
This goes back to something that I had tried to initiate a discussion before, and it has to do with the FCC MU/TC policy in page 9. What I have always envisioned, and I don't know if anybody else has, is more of a Merrick Park type development in this particular area where we encourage shops and restaurants and cafes and walking. And so I'm not sure that this text amendment, this proposed policy, why doesn't it include encouraging pedestrian-friendly walkways, encouraging mixed-use building of communities, and encouraging nightlife and new business? Isn't that...
Yeah, can you guys answer that? Because I thought that was, so...
Yeah.
Seems like...
Could you please,
Yeah.
folks, talk into the mic so the people who are listening?
Yeah, we'll just read it, the full policy, because I just pulled out the highlights.
Right.
Transit-oriented development to us is walkable, downtown-type development, so if we read the whole policy, maybe we just summarized it too much.
So,
I mean, because part of this area backs up to Snake Creek Canal, and that is something that we've always talked about, trying to develop that for restaurants, cafes, bookstores, music, whatever, and creating a nightlife in the center.
Correct.
Go on.
So on page 30 of your application, I believe is the same page, policy 1.6.6 goes into more detail than what this slide is showing, but it basically is saying that it supports or encourages. Are you on that page of the application?
Page 30.
the portrait.
Portrait.
Page 30.
So 1.6.6 is for the MUTC. And it basically says the designation is hereby created to encourage transit-oriented development, which is, again, mixed use that is consistent with an urban downtown, including corporate office, ground floor retail, upper floor standalone residential, and other non-residential uses as specified in the appropriate zoning district. So what we've done is, this is, again, is the general policy. In our zoning, which we'll come back to in a couple of weeks, you'll see the specific uses that are permitted. And what we've done is we've actually streamlined it. So we've added uses that are not there today to make it, again, more conducive to mixed use. You'll see that in detail in the zoning, but the policy says has that in place.
And again, this is the general policy. This would not preclude
Okay, let me
three-floor Merrick.
let me ask it a different way.
Yeah.
Can they build Merrick Park there?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, this would not, just because we're saying ground floor retail, that's standard. I mean,
We sold it.
But,
So
okay.
We got our answer.
Okay. I had another question. Has somebody made a policy decision for the city that we would want the Tico building to be designated as historical?
No.
Wait,
This is
I would- I-
making that policy decision.
I thought it was
My
historic.
understanding was, it is, it was, if it's not, it.
I'm being told it
has to be-
is.
It's
Okay.
on the National
it's-
Historic Register?
county.
Okay.
Let me do more research.
Let me ask a different question. We're not making a policy decision on okay.
We're saying that when you walk in the door with that parcel, which they're probably not going to anyway.
Got it.
That they have to know that it's historic and
Right.
deal with it.
Okay.
Answer is no.
Another question I had, and it's for area, where are the areas?
It's like page 3. Page 8.
The area off of page,
Eight
right, okay, for areas 5 and 6.
The employment centers.
Are we still encouraging or considering that could become a train hub, a transportation hub? That's within the policy.
Yes.
We didn't write any policies in this comprehensive plan about where the train station should be because we can't tell that now. So the train station could still go either location in the FCC or it could go anywhere. It's not addressed in the comp plan.
Okay, and then on page 19, with regard to the issues for the MU waterfront, or not issues, that to me, I think that we need to mandate that any development of that must have access to and from 826, State Road 826. I mean, it's not just that the addition of multiple access and traffic mitigation, but that there must be access from 826, because otherwise you're going to lock in that area with traffic. So can we do something to make it mandatory for development that there has to be access from 826 going both east and west?
I think that everyone has made a point of that, and I think the landowner is under the understanding of that, but is that addressed at zoning, or how do we address that?
Something that specific we normally wouldn't want to put in the comprehensive plan just in case someone came up with some brilliant idea, but I don't think there is one, so we could add that in if it made everyone more comfortable.
Let's add in the word, like, especially from State Road 836.
I mean, because if they're going to do that kind of development, we already know when Dade County tried to close our fire rescue station there that without access, I see Fortuna here, what was it, like 23 minutes one time for them to respond to a call? 13? I mean, it was just so we need,
Yeah.
if we're going to put,
We can add that.
We'll
do
add
development, there must be that access.
Okay, we'll add
That's
that
a
specifics
life,
to
health,
that.
safety issue as well as quality of
I
life.
think
Yeah.
Councilman DiFilippo has said specifically, so if that language, it's not encouraging, but
No, especially,
This is an-
We'll add the
this is,
language to 826.
specific-
Yeah.
yeah.
we'll, in the zoning, we'll have the more detail, but for the master policy, we still could say especially, from 826 and reference it specifically. I think when we wrote the addition of multiple access points and traffic mitigation, that's exactly what we meant.
But I think that it's, because what I don't want to see is they come in and say, well, there are 2 entrances and exits off of Northeast 35th Avenue, and that doesn't solve access. That's why I said east and west access from 826.
All right,
Traffic
we'll
mitigation.
definitely
Look
add
at
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's keep with that for 1 second. What's the public access on page 19 to waterfront that you're considering for the Eastern Shores area?
Well, that will be determined when they come in with the site plan, but what we're saying is there just has to be public access. They can't gate it off and make it private just for the residential that might be located along the waterfront.
Okay, and let me ask you, because 2 of the points that I have down as notes were already brought up. When it comes to the alleyway, in the comp plan, it's the fact that you have the option, if feasible, that the city may say that the alleyway. It's not going to be mandatory that somebody come to us and they would not be blocking something, but we do not want to give that alleyway up or whatever, but it's never going to be mandatory. It still would be, it's just in the comp plan that it's a possibility and it would be up to the, okay.
Right. That's absolutely correct.
In reference to walkability, that's one of the things, not just on Hanford Boulevard and that whole area, but 19th Avenue, if that builds up, if the railroad does stop here, if the train does stop here, and that hub really expands, because as we said many times, what we're voting on here isn't for today. It could be 10 years from now. And it expands up to 19th Avenue. That is in the comp plan as we read it right now, that is also going to be geared towards walkability, geared towards transit.
Yes.
And the last question, I heard from Mr. Lorber that we could make changes until the actual adoption when it comes back from the state. if you made a change when it came back, would it then have to go back to the state?
Generally not. I mean, it depends on the scope of the change.
Well,
Maybe
and
our
let me
expert could-
just clarify, after you adopt, we send a compliance package to DCA, and what it has in it is your adoption ordinance, any changes since their first review. Now, usually those are resulting from their comments, but if there's changes made by the commission when you adopt, we highlight those in the letter, that these were changes. They do review that, and they'll find it whether it's in compliance or not in compliance with the law. So they do another review, but it's a much shorter time frame, and it's not as an extensive a review, but we do report out to the state whatever changes were made since they had their review.
Well, I have to say, in reference to this, you know, it doesn't come around every year. So this comp plan, the study of it, and I'm glad we have this printout to take. I'm going to review it again. There may be other questions before we have our vote. But this is very important, and I'm glad that our council, when it comes down to making decisions on this comp plan, really stop and think not just today but the future, because it does not come around. It is a tedious work, and it's a lot of work, but it's for the benefit of the community today and in the future, not just the way the city looks, which everybody's worried about the city, how is it going to look, how is it going to look. But we also have to worry about the financial upkeep of the city and the financial gains, and that's why I think that this is such a successful plan. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yeah, I've got one, but go ahead.
In the comp plan, you talk about level of service and minimum requirements for parks and parkland. If we wanted to make it mandatory, is it in the comp plan that if you're going to build X number of residential units, you have to do X, you have to donate X amount of park space, green space, or public art? Is that the type of thing that goes in the comp plan?
What the comprehensive plan requires is that you have to have at least 2 acres per thousand in your city in order to allow additional development. If you didn't have that much, you couldn't approve additional development without them mitigating the decline in parks and recreation. That's the general statement. So because you already have enough parks and recreation, as far as the state is concerned, this is consistent with your levels of service. If you want to require additional parks and recreation, I'm not really certain that would be a comprehensive plan requirement, because those levels of service have to apply citywide. You can't take, well, I suppose you could take one area and create a higher level of service. I don't know how you would justify that.
Well, what I'm saying though is the comp plan is the blueprint for the future and for development. And if we say, if you are going to increase the number of residential units by X percentage in these specific areas, then you have to have public parks, greenways, or public art. Is this not the time to make a philosophical decision that we want to enhance the beauty, the public access?
But
We
isn't
do
that
have that.
already here?
Yes, because in the policies, and I'd have to zoom up to see which one it is, we do require all those things, and we went through that. Let me see if I can just find it real
Including
quick.
art. I saw art
Yeah.
as well.
I think we added
We-
more parkland than what the state required, correct?
Right. We have regulating plans that show all the greenways and open spaces required. We also have in our general mixed-use statement policies that you have to do these, let me just find it. So, yeah.
I think
We just went over it.
I think perhaps it could be confusing to some of the if somebody's listening to this,
8.1.
and on the one hand, there's a slide saying you have more than enough parks. That doesn't mean that when any of these big developments come in, we cannot get additional park, open space amenities.
Right.
Is that in here? Is
Right.
it yes or no, I guess?
That is
Okay,
in there.
So it is.
If you look at policy 1.8.1, that's where all these amenities are required. And it's on page 12 of the presentation, and it's also on page
Of the landscape.
31 of the application, yeah.
Well, if you also go to page 33, it says draft regulating plans result in an additional 14.14 acres of
Right.
open space.
Yes. Right. I think what we need to do is there's two separate things we're talking about. One is the policies that will govern these districts. Two is the concurrency analysis, which is what the state looks at. When you look at a concurrency analysis, you have to make sure you're meeting all your level of service standards in order to move forward with any change to your comp plan. Check, that box is checked off. The policies say we will get more additional open space and recreation and art and amenities when we approve projects within these districts because we want it geographically located, not just mathematically correct.
That's it.
Right.
That's
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But the mechanisms will be further fleshed out in the zoning code. The general policy and the comp plan, specific mechanisms further down the line.
Okay. I just have really, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If I may, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'll start backwards since we were talking about, the amount of people and the population growing. My concern today, the way it is, and, talking, and I've seen all my colleagues talk about the blueprint for the future and the future, I don't see it how the schools would be sufficient enough, and that's one thing that really is important to me, is to know that if we're able to provide a quality education in the city of North Miami Beach, we should be able to accommodate the difference in population, how many children per household was calculated, and is our schools going to really be able to hold this, or are we going to need to have other schools, other charter schools, whatever the case may be. But quality, we never want to diminish the quality of life and of education, having this influx of development. So I don't know, here it says one thing, and I don't know how my colleagues feel, but the schools in the area are pretty crowded as they are. I don't know if this would make any.
Well, let's get the answer from the experts. Experts, what's the story on the schools?
Right. The way Miami-Dade does their school concurrency is they have a specific student generation rate for each kind of household. So we use the student generation rate for the types of households or for the types of housing unit that we're going to expect. And we calculated how many children. Then you look at a concurrency service area. Because Miami-Dade can bus kids anywhere within that area, they look at the total capacity within that area to determine if they have enough seats. They can't build schools until they don't have enough seats. So right now, they're projected to have enough seats to handle this influx of additional development. So you meet the standards of concurrency. Now, I think I'll let Richard, because I know what you're going to say.
So that study's been done.
Yes.
Page 34.
Yes, in the
Based on 52,000.
yes, if you look
But
at the difference
I also
of
just want to say that in the future, when an application comes in for building a residential project, staff has to sit with them, and we bring them to the school board, and the school board does the analysis at the time they're applying. What is the capacity? Are they over, under? And it could be that the school board makes the developer pay to construct a new classroom, add facilities. It happens like that. The larger the project, the more it would be significant. So we will still have to abide by that, and it's on the developer to provide that. It's usually with the school board and the developer making those transactions. So this just says that we can go ahead. It makes sense that there's generally this is okay, but now we're on an individual basis. It could be very specific.
Okay.
And I did have one more question. Going back to item 1.88 in reference to the alleys that we were speaking about, I did have a question in reference to developers or new redevelopment coming into the city of North Miami Beach. So, for instance, a developer comes into the city and buys out a block of a city, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe more. Would we be able, or would the developer have the right to come in and request for the city to abandon the alley and be able to work on and and providing bigger lots, does that allow for that?
Right, and one of the challenges is in some of the alleys, that's where the utilities are located. So that would have to be looked at, and then the developer would have to determine if it's worth the money for him to relocate all the utilities in order to have the access over that space. And in some cases, if they did own blocks and blocks, it would be worth it.
And it happens many times, when somebody has the whole block. We have to make sure as a city that it's still served with deliveries, trash pickup, those kind of things that may have been using the alley. But if they address in the new site plan those facilities for servicing the parcel, we can perhaps agree to vacate that alley. There may be other public benefits that compensate for that.
That was a key word that I was waiting for Richard to say, the benefits of each individual project when in regards to the alley and vacating the alley.
Fantastic.
Mr.
All
Mayor,
set?
Yeah.
All
Could I-
set? Tony?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
I just want to ask, wasn't public utilities addressed? I saw it addressed in here.
Yes.
I saw that public utilities is in it. Thank you.
I just have a couple of quick, a question and a comment. One of my main concerns during this process has been, because, that this is a dual, there's two things here. There's the comp plan and there's the zoning. And my main concern is that, as I look out and I know that we've all been contacted, there's a lot of activity in the city.
Yes.
And the way I see it, there's a lot of investors that are sitting on the sideline, a lot of landowners in our city, business owners in the city that are sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what happens with this. Many of them have been burned before with promises, some things are going to happen, and then they never, they didn't happen or whatever, for whatever reason. So I guess they look at it and they say, hey, they talk the talk, but are they going to walk the walk? And I think we're here where we're going to walk the walk. But one of my concerns is I want to give clarity and some certainty to people that want to come in and invest dollars into our city to help improve the city. I want to make sure that this process gives them the certainty of what, the framework, but I also want to make sure that we have it, we're not just gifting, land value in this particular vote. That is done case by case on a zoning question. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was on, because that's what I've been told. I want to make sure it was on the record. The other thing that I know that we've had, there's a big concern is one of the biggest properties potential for development is that intracoastal, whatever you call it, MU East, whatever the name is. And I think that on that particular one, anyone who's ever asked me, I've been very clear in my opinion, and I'm just one vote, but my criteria, if you will, to see something happen there has been very simple to everyone who would ask. Number one, traffic has to be addressed. And the way I see that is, issue of the, what they call the Texas U-turn around underneath the bridge, just like the DOT did on the other side, on the Sunny Isles side. Number two, that it has to remain a neighborhood center, because that is where the 5,000 people that live in Eastern Shores shop, go to the movies, restaurants, not just there, but people from all around the surrounding communities. It needs to be enhanced and made more walkable. It's not a very walkable thing now. It's like you feel like you're taking your life in your hands when you're walking in there through that entrance. So that needs to be addressed. Maintain it as a town center, make it walkable. Number four, that there has to be a park given to the city out of that land. Because there's 5,000 people that live in that, surrounded in that, blocked in that area, and the total green space allotted to them would fit inside this council chambers, and with room to spare, and that's just not acceptable. So that has to be part of it. And the fifth criteria is that there has to be some sort of adequate impact fees or whatever coming to the city that can be, targeted towards the area to mitigate any of the impacts in the area. So that's kind of like, what I've been looking for, but I guess those are things that will come. Part of them are addressed here, but at the zoning level, they'll be like set in stone, right?
Right.
Okay.
And Mayor, most importantly, in that district you're talking about, the police substation and the Eastern Shores.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. That's one question that I do have on that is, no, I like that idea. I'm just concerned, if you put that in the comp plan, does that mean that in perpetuity the city is, like, what happens if there's like a funding issue 10 years from now? What happens?
What the comp plan
Is that
says
the-
is that issue has to be addressed when they come to a pre-app. They have to talk about it. Now,
Talk about
if
it,
the
and-
city at that time says, we don't need this anymore.
Okay, got it.
obviously-
No, okay, I just wanted to make sure that it's the city, the city's the one that makes the call on how that's addressed.
Right.
They have to
So
come
what-
with it and be prepared to talk about it.
If your entire staff changes over next year and you have all new people, when
Okay.
somebody comes in for a pre-app, they'll know to talk about those issues, but it doesn't say how
All
they
right.
have to be
Okay,
addressed.
sounds good, yeah, because at the 50,000-foot level, to be locked into a very specific thing, it makes it very difficult. Final thing then, really, I have been talking to so many people, Madam Manager, and council, I'm sure you guys have been inundated with calls and different, conversations. We are the next frontier. I mean, the next renaissance in South Florida is happening in North Miami Beach. We are blessed with the most incredible location, sandwiched between the beach, between I-95 and Golden Glades, where you can access anywhere within minutes. We're halfway to the Fort Lauderdale Airport, halfway to the Miami Airport, so you can be 5 minutes to the Aventura Mall, 5 minutes to the beach, 5 minutes to the Golden Glades. If we get this right, our city is going to be, the livability of our city is going to be enhanced a quantum leap. So I am really, really excited that we have finally reached the point where this thing is going to be coming to us for a vote. So again, staff, thank you for all the hard work and the input and the expert advice on it. So, okay, that's, last one, because we
Okay, two things. One, just what you brought up about Eastern Shores, that goes back to my suggestion that it becomes part of our comp plan, that if you're going to increase the residential density by X percentage, because if you look on page 29, what you're proposing in that MU East is a tripling of the number of residential units. So there's got to be some sort of
Mandatory.
philosophical or mandate that we're going to decide that if you're going to increase the residential density by X percentage, you've got to give us park land back. The other thing is, as the liaison to the Planning and Zoning Board, I want to sit up here and thank those members. I see 3-4 members of the Planning and Zoning Board who showed up here tonight personally to listen to that, and I appreciate it, and on behalf of the entire council, we thank you for your dedication and coming here.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and adjourn for a real short break while they get set up for the regular council meeting, and we'll get back and get started with our council meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great job, guys.